As we shared the Brewers' story and its ties to Atlanta United and the Raleigh Foundation, one aspect of her story was one we felt the need to share outside of our first posting. SDH asked the family and Dean Crowe at the foundation what advice you would give to others either directly involved in situations like these or someone who may be a stage or two removed to best help her understand from the center what's going on. Here's their answers. Will, what advice would you give your peers who are going through the same thing that you are going through? And, like if you wander into a lunchroom, you wander into a theater, and you're all just kind of hanging out, and you're there with a bunch of your peers. What advice would you give them if they were going through the same thing that you and your family were going through, or even if they're not, but you want them to understand what you're going through? What advice would you give your peers in a situation like this?
I feel like I would say that every day is a blessing, and you have to make sure that you take full advantage of that, and to be always happy no matter what. And even if you're going through a very, very, very rough time, and like what we went through, and all these other people that are going through it, I feel like you need to keep your head up and know that nothing can stop you from being happy. And so you have to use that happiness to do everything that you can to be with that sibling or that's going through a rough time, and to help people understand. It's tough to help other people understand what you're going through, especially because nobody else. It's a it's super rare, and it's difficult for other people that don't have it and are quote unquote normal ish, that to understand like what I or other people, my friends that are going through this too. It's difficult, but I'd say to just whoever, if they need help or if they're sad about sometimes if they're like just wanting to be alone, I feel like you should respect them. You should always be with them and let them know that I'm here for you, whatever you need, all that. I feel like just being there for somebody that's going through a tough situation is the best thing you could do.
So then let me ask you, Matt, the same question, because adults are different when they handle things sometimes, and they don't know how to approach other adults that aren't going through the same thing that they are. They're on the outside looking in. What advice would you give to adults and other families or other married couples or just other adults that might be brushing in the outside of an instance about the reality of the situation and that it's okay not to be okay, those kinds of things? What advice would you give adults in this situation like this?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking that because I think my number one thing would be communication. When you're talking about your spouse, the idea of having open communication with them, making sure you're talking through everything. You'll not agree on everything. We all grieve and process, the illness, and unfortunately, in Caroline's case, her passing. We all approach that differently. So communicating to each other is key. And then, William and Jack know this, and Caroline did as well. We always had open dialogue and lines of communication with each other where we said, hey, if you're feeling something, tell us. If you don't want to get into it, that's okay too. But know that we're here, to talk with you and help you through that. So to other parents, I would say make sure that you're communicating with each other and with your kids. But also, I think the second piece of advice would be to always feel, um, always always know that it is okay to reach out and say, hey, I need help. I need someone to talk to. I need the opportunity to get, what's in my head and in my heart out, so that you're not carrying around these burdens, because it's already hard enough trying to deal with just being a parent, just being, just living life normally. But then to add childhood cancer on top of that is a weight that honestly no parent or child or sibling should ever have to bear. But if you are in that position, you have to reach out for help, and you have to know that it is okay and expected that this is one of the heaviest weights you can carry. And to whatever degree you don't have to do it alone, that's what you do. So, we have always tried to spread, as much positivity and joy as we can. But at the same time, know that, yeah, there are going to be those very, very dark and difficult times. And, we still have them today, but we know to keep talking and to keep communicating and keep those lines open so that no one feels as if they're completely alone in the situation.
I imagine that you both still talk about her in the present tense, and will always talk about her in the present tense.
We do. And it's, I can't tell you the number of times that we talk about, oh, Caroline would say this, or,
She'd probably do something
right
over there or something like that.
And we'll still do her little mannerisms and things that she says, because she was a very funny person. I mean, she had a knack for making people laugh and just really kind of bringing out the kid in you. And yet at the same time, as an adult, she could talk about the most, adult topics and situations. It was real. Again, she was a very, very special human being. So,
what advice would you give to families who are going through this? And it can be the smallest piece of advice, or it could be something that is the most grand piece of advice you can think of. But when you have families that are fighting this, and you have families that are growing up too soon, what advice would you give them about the day-to-day and how to handle this as best as they possibly can, knowing the circumstances?
It's funny, we ate in Mr. Blank's suite with Matt. It was just my team and Matt. We ended up sitting down at a table eating, and we kind of talked a little bit about this. I mean, the first thing that I would say is, once they get their sea legs. So I feel like when a family is when the diagnosis happens, you are just like, what just happened? Like kids, what, and you're reeling. So depending on, it's really funny, John, depending on what their diagnosis is how long it takes the family to get their sea legs, for the parents to be like, this is my new world. So let's just fast forward that they have their sea legs. Always remember, like, it wasn't just Caroline who was diagnosed with cancer. It was the family, and the diagnosis really affects the whole family. And so to try to remember, like, the whole family is going through this, and the siblings are going through it. And, that is really hard. And then I would just say, embrace life. Like, they're so resilient, these families. And, I think the families that really go in and embrace, organizations that want to do things for them, and, for them to have experiences, or whether it is to do family support, they seem to really do better, if you will, because they're embraced. And they also then a lot of times get to be around other families that are going through the fight. And so people understand. We were laughing last night. I was like, if there's one thing Rally has taught me, that the Rally families have taught me, it is like to live life in the moment. And we will have kids come, directly from having an 8-hour chemotherapy infusion and a spinal tap. And if we had tickets to the Atlanta United game and they would be there. Like, they are not like, oh, like, now you go home and rest. Or they can, like, literally, I've gone to meet Rally families, a Rally mom and her son, for lunch, and the son was like, he's probably 4 or 5. We were walking into the restaurant. He threw up all over himself, all over the mom. She just turns around. We walk back, and she pops her trunk up, and she has a change clothes for him and changes his clothes, and then she had a shirt, and she changed her shirt. And then, I was getting ready to tell him goodbye, and I was so sorry. And she starts walking back to the restaurant, and I go, what are you doing? And she goes, aren't we going to lunch? Like, they just don't. And I think those families that are like, this is a cruddy hand that we've been dealt, but we're going to make the most of it and keep living life. and making memories and just not let this, define us completely, they do really well. So I would say, embrace life and also be around some other cancer families, because it's real. And I also say, I always do say too, your world in some ways is going to shrink down. And so I always say, make sure the family is, prayed for, that their bills are paid, their grass is mowed, the other kids, if they're little, are taken care of, or getting them to their, sporting events or school, all of that. Make sure all of that is happening. And then if you want to do more and you can't assign all those things out to other people, come to Rally and we will give you something to do. Or if you hear this story and you want to have kids with cancer and families with cancer, come to us and we will give you something to do. And, we will help you be able to be involved. So that I think is really important. And I also think of setting up one complete way that you can communicate with so many people. Now, a lot of families will set up a Facebook group, or, they will have an Instagram where there's also Caring Bridge, where instead of having to tell the same story over and over, you can kind of get all the news out at one time, whether it's happy news or sad news. It's just easier than you having to tell the story or update individuals again and again. So there's lots of resources out there, but their resilience is, that's what's just, I think, gets them through so much.